Geopolitical assessment: Turkey, Israel, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Historical context: the rivalry and potential clash between Turkey and Israel cannot be understood without revisiting the longer arc of Middle Eastern history. Theodor Herzl's vision of a greater Israel, articulated at the turn of the 20th century, included not only Palestine but also parts of Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, southern Turkey, and even Cyprus. British imperial strategists, recognizing Cyprus as a natural base for controlling the Eastern Mediterranean, formally annexed the island in 1914 after centuries of Ottoman rule. Ever since, Cyprus has stood at the intersection of European, Turkish, and Israeli strategic interests. During the Cold War, Turkey anchored NATO's southern flank, while Israel became Washington's main regional outpost after 1967. Both states acted as pillars of Western containment strategy, but their cooperation was rarely direct, as Ankara balanced Arab sensitivities with its own internal politics. By contrast, Israel and Iran under the Shah maintained close ties, exchanging oil, intelligence, and even military technology, ties that continued covertly after 1979 despite public hostilities. Current dynamics. Fast forward to the present, and the underlying tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean remain. Israel has long sought to pull Turkey into a conflict, not for its own survival, but to secure control over oil and gas fields in the Levant Basin and offshore Cyprus. Such a scenario would ideally see the United States drawn into direct confrontation with Turkey, leaving Israel as the ultimate beneficiary. Yet a direct Turkish-Israeli clash is improbable. President Erdogan's rule has always depended on quiet arrangements with Israel, particularly in energy and trade. These links, coupled with backing from international networks that facilitated his rise to power in 2002, ensure that Ankara's hostility remains largely theatrical. Erdogan's role is comparable to that of Eli Cohen, the Israeli operative who infiltrated Syrian political circles in the 1960s, both figures positioned to serve greater geopolitical designs. Even the famous 2009 Davos exchange between Erdogan and Shimon Peres, hailed in Turkey as a moment of defiance, was in reality more spectacle than substance. Meanwhile, Turkey has achieved a degree of economic self-sufficiency, producing over 80% of its needs and expanding exports, partly as a consequence of Western sanctions. Yet Ankara remains geopolitically isolated. Turks have historically distrusted both Arabs and Iranians, a sentiment that is mutual. Unlike Israel, which enjoys an unshakable alliance with the United States, Turkey's partnerships are transactional and situational. It aligns with Russia in one theater, opposes it in another. In Libya, Turkey and Russia backed rival factions. In Syria, their interests clashed again. Israel, however, maintains far more consistent and discreet ties with Moscow, dating back to Soviet Jewish immigration and post-Cold War coordination. The Iran-Israel rivalry is another carefully managed illusion. Despite rhetoric of annihilation, the two states have cooperated in intelligence, arms, and oil at various moments, even after 1979. Their relationship is better understood as one of controlled hostility, useful for mobilizing domestic and foreign audiences. Emerging flashpoints. The most immediate potential conflict lies in Cyprus. The island, divided since Turkey's 1974 intervention, sits atop contested maritime zones and energy reserves. A clash there could involve not just Turkey and Greece, but also the UK as a guarantor power, France, already present in the Eastern Med with naval deployments, and Israel, through its energy stakes and military partnerships. Herzl's early maps of Greater Israel explicitly included Cyprus and parts of southern Turkey as part of the Promised Land, underlining the island's enduring symbolic and strategic role. Long-term outlook. If historical precedent is any guide, the borders of the Middle East are not fixed. From the Sykes-Picot Agreement, 1916, to the partition of Palestine, 1947, and the invasions of Iraq, 1991, 2003, the region has been redrawn repeatedly under the weight of external interventions and internal collapse. Within the next 2 decades, the likelihood of further border shifts is high. And while most regional states face fragmentation, Israel is positioned to expand its reach, formally or informally, through control over resources, alliances, and military dominance. Implications and recommendations. Cyprus as the next flashpoint. Policymakers should prepare for escalating tensions in the eastern Mediterranean, where competing claims over energy resources could trigger a multi-party conflict. Turkey's isolation, Ankara's lack of stable alliances makes it vulnerable to strategic manipulation. Western policymakers should recognize that Turkey's transactional ties with Russia and others are fragile and seek to exploit this leverage. Illusion of rivalries. The Iran, Israel, and Turkey, Israel rivalries often serve theatrical purposes. Decision-makers must distinguish between staged hostility and genuine conflict to avoid miscalculation. Redrawing of borders. The precedent of 20th-century interventions suggests that further territorial changes in the Middle East are plausible within 2 decades. Policymakers should anticipate scenarios of Israeli expansion alongside fragmentation of weaker states. Energy security. Control over the Levant Basin and Eastern Mediterranean reserves will be decisive. Strategic positioning in Cyprus and naval presence in the region will determine future access and influence.